Welcome to Programming Rainbow. In this video, we'll continue on the series of Beginner's Guide to SDL3 in the C language. This is video number 3. If you're just starting out with this one, you can go to github.com, Programming Rainbow, and this is Beginner's Guide to SDL3 in C. You can clone that repository, move inside the directory, and you can see where we're at. So I'm just going to show you the final code real quick. This is going to display a background. It's going to have true type font that's moving around the screen, and every time it bounces off the wall, it says SDL. It has an icon that I can control. And whenever I press spacebar, it changes the render color behind the background image, and it also says C. Okay, I'm just showing it real quick. So there's the font moving around, and it says what it says. There's the music playing. There's me controlling the C icon. This is pressing spacebar. And that is everything to see. We also have the title here. We have an icon loaded here, and we can close it. So in the last video, we created the game loop and everything else, and we're able to close the window. In this video, we're going to draw something on the background, and we're going to load that icon. So right away up here, I'm going to change this to background and icon. Okay, background and icon. And I wanted to show you right away, we're going to be working with the image module. The image module allows us to load images that are not bitmap images. I'm using PNG images in this. So we want to use this SDL image module. This image module allows you to have different types of like JPEGs and everything else that you can load. It used to be in SDL2 that we needed to bring this module online and take it offline. But in SDL3, you do not need to do that. But we do still need to add the SDL3_image. This is slightly different, the way that this header is defined as well. The SDL3_image used to just be SDL3 / and then SDL_image. So now it's SDL3. So we need to add this. So we have access to this module. And then we are going to be talking about loading a texture. So right up here, SDL3, and it is image, and then SDL3 or SDL.h. That should be correct. Hopefully I got that all correct. You will need this installed on your system. So I'm on Arch Linux, by the way. You will need to, on Arch, you can install SDL3 as per the normal Pacman, but SDL3 image at the time of recording is not in the normal repository. It's in the AUR, so you'll need to do that, and there's directions for that here. So the first thing we want to do is load a texture. So we want to load an image, but we want to load it to be some hardware accelerated image, and that is called a texture. That is going to take a pointer to the render, and it's going to take a string to the location of that image that needs loaded, and it's going to return a pointer to an SDL texture. If this function fails, this pointer will be null. It returns the null, so that's how we're checking that. So we already don't need to do a bunch of steps that we need to do in SDL2. We don't need to bring this module online or offline. There's no image init or image quit that we need to deal with. So we're just going to go right into loading the image. Let me show you the image right here. I'm going to load the background.png image right now. And I'm going to create a new function for this. So this game init SDL, this is bringing SDL modules and things that we need for SDL online. But loading of media, loading of images and sound effects and music and stuff like that, I'm going to put that in game load media. So I'm going to create a new function. And this is going to return a bool because these can fail. This is the same struct, game, pointer to G. That's what we've been seeing every time. And in this one right away, I do want to hold this texture somewhere. So I'm going to add up here. And this is going to be an SDL texture. And it's a pointer, remember. So I'm going to call it background is a pointer to an SDL texture. And not with a capital B. So I've just added this into our game struct. Background is a pointer to an SDL texture. So since we have that, we can use SDL load texture to populate that pointer. So background, SDL load texture. And I need two things here. It's complaining about this. Sorry, it's not SDL load texture. That's why it's complaining. It's image load texture. Yeah. It wasn't my right here. It wasn't giving me this. That's why I knew something was wrong. So right away we need the render, and then we need a string to the location of this. So our render is G render. And now let's look at the location relative to where we're running these binaries from, the demo and the beginner's guide binaries. Relative to this, they're in a directory called images. And then inside of that directory, this one is background.png. So I'm going to use the relative path. And it's going to be background.png. Okay, so if this fails, we just need to check the pointer. So I'm just going to grab this up here. Okay, and I'm also going to put the happy path here so it doesn't complain. Okay, so we do need to check this background, not the render. Okay, and this changes again from SDL2 where we would put image get error here. So there is no more image get error. It is just SDL get error every time. So we don't need to change this. And we can say error loading texture. And okay, so this should all be good. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call this from our game new, because our game new makes sure everything about the game is brought online. So we're going to call it, I'm going to call it after we've brought SDL online and everything like that. So I'm just going to copy this right here and change this to load media. Okay, and it can fail, so we're going to return false if it fails. So this should bring our texture, this should load our texture. And I'm going to easily cause an error here so we can see what happens when we do have an error. But since we have allocated memory to a texture right here, we need to know how to destroy it. So in SDL, we have SDL destroy texture. It's not part of the image module. Image deals with making textures that are not bitmaps. But inside of SDL, we already have texture. So SDL destroy texture is a part of the SDL module. And we just pass in the pointer to the texture. It's void. Okay, so we're going to do very much like the way that we've done with freeing other memory down here. It's going to be last in, first out. So I'm going to do it the same way where I'm going to check the pointer and then call the function to free the memory and then set that pointer to null. So this is G background. Make sure that pointer is real, and then we can do SDL destroy texture and the pointer to the texture, which is G background. And then G background needs to be set to null. Okay. So I'm going to put these kind of together, the render and the window, because these kind of are bringing the SDL things offload. I'm going to put the media kind of group together so they're separated out a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to run this just to make sure nothing's going wrong. We're not actually going to see anything yet. And so I am just using GCC to compile it to called demo. Okay, so I have done something wrong here. So right here, I am adding the linker to SDL, but not the linker to the SDL image. So we need to add this SDL3, and this is an image. I think it's complaining because it's trying to remove something that doesn't exist. So the and is complaining. Okay, so that's expected. We're not telling anything to draw yet. We're just we're loading a texture and then taking it offline. Now let's see if we ask it to load a texture that doesn't exist. We'll misspell this and see what happens then. Okay, this is the error message that we created, this error load texture, which is right here. And then we got the SDL get error right here, the string. And this is the SDL internal message that it gave us. But then we also see it cleaned itself up correctly. Okay, so couldn't load image because we misspelled the image. So that was kind of the how the error messages were working. I didn't really get a chance to show that before. So we have this image. Let's display it. So this is slightly different from SDL2. They just changed the name of the function. It used to be SDL render copy. Now it's SDL render texture. Okay, so it still does the same thing. We need a pointer to a render. We need a pointer to the texture. And now we need a source rectangle and a destination rectangle. Okay, so what's happening here? Let me go to the web page here so we can look at an image. Okay, so imagine the render is this whole dark bit of Libra Wolf here. Yeah, this is the render. And imagine the image is this picture right here. Yeah, we have two rectangles to deal with. We have a source rectangle and a destination rectangle. Now I've loaded an image. Let's say this is the image that I've loaded right here, right? And I need to know how much of the source image to look at. Do I want to look at just the S here? Or do I want to look at the entire image? If I want to look at the entire image, I can create a rectangle that is equal to I can put the, of the source image, I could put the X and the Y at 0, 0. And let's say this is 800 by 600. I could put the width at 800 and the height at 600, and I would get the whole image of the source rectangle because the texture is the source. Or I could just put null. If I put null in, it says, you know what, just take the entire source. So imagine if I just wanted S, I could say, you know what, I'm going to have a rectangle and it's going to start at 0, 0, and the width is going to be 100 and the height is going to be 150. And that's going to give me a rectangle around the S. Or let's say I wanted this C over here. My top left corner of this, at the X and the Y, would be something like 600 and 200. I'm just making these numbers up, but let's say it's 600 and 200, and then the width is 200, and the height is also 200 or something like that, right? That would be my source rectangle. That would mean I grabbed this part of the image that I want to display. But for us, we want the whole thing. So here's the whole image, and we can put null in to get that whole image. Now the destination rectangle is how I want this to be displayed on the render. So imagine this whole thing. Here's the render. Yeah. Well, this image is being displayed here. So we would have to count in how far here and how far down here. So our destination rectangle would be something like 200 on X and 250 on Y, something like that. So it'd be 200 by 250. And then our width would be 800 by 600. That would be our destination rectangle. And if we just said null on it, what would happen is it would take this image right here and it would stretch it and it would reach the whole render. So this S would be up here and it would be bigger, and this C would be down here, and the whole thing would be stretched. If we did null on the destination, that means the entire destination. So for our background, we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to say, I want the entire source. I want the entire image that I've loaded. I want everything, and I'm going to display it to the entire render. I'm going to stretch it across. Whoops. I'm going to stretch it across the entire render because it's just our background. It's going to be everything. So we're not really going to deal with the rectangles. It's going to be null and null, but I'm just telling you what the source is. The source is, think about the image you load and think about what part of the image you load you want to actually display. If I did this right here, just the S, and then on the destination I did null, it would take this S and it would stretch the S to display in the entire render, and it would be a weird, wonky looking S. Okay, but for our background images, the source is going to be null. I want the entire source of the texture I just loaded, the background image. And the destination is the render. I want it to be stretched across the entire render. And it just so happens that the image we're loading is 800 by 600 and the render is 800 by 600. So that's fine. So it's just simple. Okay, so that's a lot of explanation for not really needing too much information, but so that's what's going on here. This is a source destination or rectangle, and this is a destination rectangle. And all a rectangle is a struct. A rectangle is just a struct. And in SDL3, it is a struct of floats, of 32-bit floats. Okay, so it's 4 32-bit floats. We have a, let's see if we can look at it here. Yeah. In SDL2, these were ints. These were all ints, but they're now floats in SDL3. This is actually better for us because if we move things around using delta time, this is way better. But maybe for this project, it's a little bit more complicated. But anyway, that's all this is. A rect is just, and this is frect, but it uses frect in SDL3 instead of normal rect, which would be ints. And we just have a float for x, a float for y, a float for width, float for height. That's a rect. Like I said, we're not actually going to use these rects. We're going to use null, so it doesn't really matter. So SDL render texture, we need the render, we need the texture, null, and null. That's what we're doing. I'm going to go down to where we're drawing things. This is SDL render texture. And first thing we need is a render. And the next thing we need is our texture, which is the background. And then for the source, we want the whole thing of the background texture we just loaded. And for the destination, the render, we want to stretch it across the whole render. Now we should see something. Okay, and there is our image being drawn. Now, this black part here is actually the render. So this image has transparency to it. So this SDL part, but this is transparent. So I'm actually seeing the render behind it. If we change the color of the render, then we'll change the color of what's behind it. But anyway, this is our image on the screen. We can also deal with putting an image up here too. So that will be interesting. So I'm going to close this. We've already done that. Now we've loaded a texture, but there is something else. There is a texture is something that is used on the GPU that's accelerated, but there's something else called a surface, which is just loaded into memory. It's like the older way. And we want to basically set the window icon. And the window icon does not use a texture. It uses a surface, which is the non-accelerated version. So when we had image load texture, we also have image load, which just loads the surface. We don't need the render this time. We just need the file location. So this is the exact same thing of what we just did, but we don't need the render, and it returns an SDL surface, and we check it the same way. And how do we destroy a surface in SDL3? It's with SDL destroy surface. It was free surface in 2, but in 3 it's destroy surface. And let's just set that up real quick. So this icon that I want to load is going to be called C logo. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put this in the load media because I'm not going to hold on to this. This is only being loaded. Let's go back up here. In load media, this is stuff I'm holding on to. I'm not going to hold on to this icon at all. I just need it long enough to set the window icon, and then I'm going to free it immediately. So this is kind of in setting up SDL, basically, in setting up the window. So I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to create it right in the scope here, right on the stack in the scope. At least the pointer is going to be on the stack. The actual memory allocated is still on the heap, but the physical pointer is not going to be held in the game object anymore. It's just right here. So I'm going to say SDL surface, and I'll call this icon surf. Sorry, this is a pointer. Icon surf is a pointer to an SDL surface. And our function is image load, no texture this time. And all we need is the relative path to the image. So images. So images, and this one is called C logo. And we're going to check this the same way that we check anything else. Okay, so right here, we need to check if icon is real, and it's not in the G, it's just right here. Now we could put it in G, but I have no reason to. I'm not holding on to this. I have no reason to hold it. I'm going to free it right away. So we need to see if this, and we will say error loading surface, and same thing. Okay, so if this did work, we can set the window icon. So SDL set window icon, it takes a pointer to the window and a pointer to a surface. And it does return if this one does return if it failed or not. Sorry, I'm not checking this one. In SDL2, it didn't. So we will check this one then. I wasn't checking this before, but I guess we will. So this will be SDL set window icon. I spelled it wrong. That's what I did. Okay. So we need a pointer to a window. And then we need the pointer to a surface, which is not in G. It's just right here. And this can fail. So I'm assuming it returns false. Returns true on success or false. Yeah, so we're checking the false. So we'll check the bang on this one. Yeah, I'm going to do grab the same bit from here. Because we have to deal with freeing this. I could have just put this in game. Error. Setting. Window. Icon. Still get error. So I need to free this if this is succeeded or not. So we need this SDL destroy surface so that we can free this memory. But I need to free it either inside of this or not. I need to free it no matter what. Okay, so I'm just going to put it both places. I'm going to put it here before the return. SDL destroy surface. And this is just icon surf. And I'm going to put it here too. I was thinking if I should switch it over to being in game, but it doesn't need to be. So basically, we need this freed no matter what. If this function fails, this is going to happen and we leave this function so this never gets called. But if this succeeds, this never gets called, so we need to do it here. So that's a bit weird. We need to do it either way. Okay, so this should load an icon. And like I said, the pointer to this is just held here locally. So I am freeing it no matter what. If this fails right here, this icon was never populated and it was null. So no problem there. But if this one fails, then we have the problem. We need to free it no matter what. Okay, so let's just try this real quick. See if we have an icon right there. Now we got a little C symbol. Okay, so let's just go over what we've done. Now my LSP keeps trying to be helpful and it adds in things that I don't need to add it in. They're already implicitly added in. Okay, so we do have this SDL3 image, SDL3 underscore image / SDL image, and you do need to have this installed on your system. So that gives us access to loading images that are not bitmap images like PNG images, JPEG, and we do not need to bring it online for SDL3 like we did for 2. So we have no bringing it online right here like we would before, and no taking it offline down here. We don't need to do that. Nothing has changed in here, but we are using the image load to load this image to a surface. That's not a hardware accelerated, it's just a normal software surface. But that's what we need to set it with this SDL set window icon. We need the window and the surface. We set it. This could fail, so we're checking to see if that fails. And either way, if it fails or not fails, we are freeing this surface. We have created this new function, game load media. This is going to deal with all the loading of sounds and images and everything else that are not specifically for that one purpose. And we've added this background up in game to hold on to it. So background is a pointer to a SDL texture. We're using image load texture. We need a pointer to the render and the path to the image. And this is going to return either a populated pointer or null pointer. So we're checking the null right away. And that's about that. And we are calling this from game new. After we do game init SDL, this is where we're calling this. Now, since we have a background texture, we do need to bring this offline as well. So it's SDL destroy texture. We're destroying the background. We're setting it to null. And the way that we draw textures in SDL3 is SDL render texture. We need a pointer to the render, a pointer to the actual texture itself, and then our source rectangle, which we can just put null if we want the entire thing, and our destination rectangle. And again, we will change the destination rectangle later on when we're actually showing a sprite that is not taking up the whole screen. So we'll talk about rectangles again later. But for right now, it's just null and null. That's all we really need. And that is about it. So I hope you enjoyed that, or it was educational and you learned something new. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.